Buenos días. Quisiera agradecer la invitación a la UN
I would like to thank UN
Watch
Watch and the coalition of non-governmental organizations for the invitation which has made possible my presence here today.
Mi nombre es Fidel Suarez Cruz.
My name is Fidel Suarez Cruz.
Soy cubano.
I am
Fui
Cuban.
condenado a 20
I
años
was
de
condemned to
prisión.
20 years of prison.
Me mantuvieron 7
I was
años,
kept
7
in
meses
solitary
de
confinement for 7
confinamiento
years and 7 months.
Me aplicaron
I
el
was put
sistema
under the
celular,
cellular system,
que consiste
which
en vivir en
consists
una
of living
celda
in a
solitaria
solitary
sin
cell
contacto
without
con
human
ninguna persona.
contact.
Durante
For
2
2
años
years
y
and
8
8
meses me
months, I was
mantuvieron
kept in
en
a
una celda
walled-in
tapiada.
or tapiada cell.
Las celdas tapiadas tienen una
Tapiada
doble
cells
plancha
have
de
a
acero en
double-layered
lugar de la
steel
reja,
door instead of
y
bars.
las otras paredes son
The
de
other walls
cemento
are made
y
of
sin
cement
ventanas,
without
de
windows.
manera que no
This
hay
results
ventilación.
in no ventilation.
De acuerdo al reglamento de orden
According
interior
to the
de cárceles y
regulations
prisiones
of
en
interior
Cuba,
orders of jails
el preso
and
tiene
prisons in
derecho a
Cuba,
una hora de sol
a prisoner
diaria.
has a right to a daily hour of sunlight.
Durante el tiempo que me confinaron
During the
en celda
time which I
tapiada,
was
también me
confined to a
negaron a
walled-in
tomar el
tapiada
sol.
cell, I was also
La
denied
iluminación
sunlight and
artificial.
artificial illumination.
La celda era oscura todo el
The
tiempo
cell was dark at all times,
y se impedía a mi
and
familia
my
que me
family
llevara
was
un
prevented
bombillo
from bringing me a
lámpara para
light bulb
iluminar
or a
aquella
lamp to
celda.
illuminate the cell.
A este
In
trato
addition
se
to this
pueden sumar las
treatment,
terribles
I also
golpizas que
received
recibí
terrible
por negarme
beatings
a
for
usar el
refusing to
uniforme
use
de
the
preso
common
común,
prisoner uniform,
al ser yo
as
un
I was a
prisionero de
prisoner of
conciencia.
conscience.
También
I
me
was also
golpearon
brutally
brutalmente por
beaten for
negarme a
refusing to
rasurarme y a
shave and
ponerme
stand
de
up to
pie
salute the
para saludar
soldiers
a
in
los
the prison,
militares que hacían el recuento 2 veces al día en la prisión.
who would do the prisoner recount twice a day.
Periodo de tiempo de 1 mes y 9
In a
días,
time
fui
period of 1 month
golpeado
and
por
9
estas
days,
razones
I was beaten
19
for these
veces,
reasons
estando en la
19
prisión
times
de Ahuica,
while
en la
at Aguica
provincia de
prison
Matanzas,
in the
entre
province of
enero y febrero del
Matanzas
2005.
between January and February
En esta
2005.
prisión
This
se
prison
encuentra a
is
unos
located
525
525
kilómetros de mi
kilometers from
casa,
my house
en el
in the
poblado
town
del
of Cayuco,
provincia del
province of
Pinar
Pinar del Rio.
Las golpizas
These
consistían
beatings
en que un
consisted
grupo
of
de
a group of
militares
military
entraban a
men
la celda,
entering my cell.
entre 4 de ellos me
4 of them would
levantaban y
lift
me
me
lanzaban
up
contra
and
el
throw me
piso.
against the floor.
Otras
Other
veces
times they would
utilizaban
use
las
tonfas,
unos
canes
bastones
made
de
of
goma
rubber
por
on the
fuera con una
outside with a steel
varilla de
rod on
acero
the
por
inside.
dentro. Con ellas
With
me
these,
golpeaban
they
las
would beat my
rodillas con las
knees or lower
extremidades
extremities
inferiores
to
para
force me to
obligarme a que me
stand up
pusiera de
and
pie
dress in
y
the
que me
common
pusiera la
prisoner's
ropa de
clothing.
preso común. Me
They
daban
would
con los
punch me
puños
in
en el
the
abdomen,
abdomen,
las
the
costillas,
ribs.
me
They would
pateaban,
kick me. They would
me
beat my
golpeaban la
head,
cabeza dejándome
leaving me
casi
deaf
sordo
from my
del
right
oído
ear
derecho,
and almost deaf from the
casi sordo
left.
del oído derecho y casi sordo del izquierdo. Esas
These
golpizas
continued
continuadas
beatings
me dislocaron
dislocated
la
my
rodilla
right
derecha,
knee
me
and
afectaron
affected
la
my fifth
quinta
lumbar
vértebra lumbar
vertebra
y
and
la
first
primera
cervical
vértebra
vertebra.
cervical. Esa golpiza
This
me la
beating was
propinaron
carried
en una
out
celda
in a
especial
special
cuya
cell,
estructura se
which has
asemeja a un
architecture
número
that
5.
resembles a number 5.
Es una celda
It
de
is a
70
system of
peldaños.
cells
Para entrar a ella
in
se
which
pasa
upon
por un
entering,
pasillo muy
you have to
estrecho
pass
y
3 very
oscuro.
narrow hallways and
Nadie
2
puede
barred
escuchar
doors.
nada, saber nada
No
de
one
lo
can
que
hear or
pasa.
know anything of what happens there.
Me mantuvieron un mes y
I was
9 días
kept
de
in
castigo.
punishment for a month and 9
El oficial
days.
que dirigía esta
The
golpiza
official
de
who
forma
personally
personal,
directed
que es
these
el capitán
beatings
que se
is the
hace
captain who
llamar
calls himself
Cruz.
Emilio Cruz.
Las mismas eran
These
ordenadas
were
por el
ordered by
oficial
the
de la
official of
policía
the
política
political
que
police who in
atendía la
charge of this
prisión,
prison,
que se hacía
who
llamar
calls himself
Peñate, y
Piñate,
este por la
who
sección
receives
21
orders
del
from
Consejo
Section
de
21
Abogados.
of the Council of State.
El 27 de julio
On July
de ese
27th
mismo
of the
año
same year,
2005,
2005,
en la misma prisión
in
por
the same
seguir
prison
negándome
for
a
continuing to
rasurarme, fui
refuse to
golpeado
shave,
nuevamente
I
por
was
dos
newly beaten
oficiales
by
de la
2
prisión
prison
que se
officials
hacen
who called
llamar
themselves
Dioval
Dioval
Gainza
Gainza and
alias
Yusley
Jabao.
alias El Habao.
Me golpearon
They
con los
punched me
puños por
throughout
el
my
cuerpo, por
body
el
and on
cuerpo
my
y por la
head,
cabeza,
causing me
causándome
multiple
hematomas
bruises.
múltiples. No me
They
han
did not
golpeado
beat me directly on
directamente
my
en la cara
face
para
so
no
as not
dejar
to leave
huellas
visible
visibles.
marks.
Estando
While
confinado en la
confined in
prisión
Kilo
Kilo 8
Ocho
en Pinar
prison
del
in
Río,
Pinar
recibí
del
otras
Rio, I
golpizas.
received other beatings.
En una de ellas, por
During one of these
protestar para
beatings, for
exigir que le dieran
protesting to
atención
demand
médica a
medical
un
attention for an
fui
inmate,
arrastrado desde
I
el
was
tercer
violently
piso de la
dragged from the
prisión por
3rd
las
floor of the
escaleras
prison down the
hasta el
stairs to the
hasta el
1st
primer
floor
piso de forma
and
violenta.
later transferred to area number 2 of the
Luego
punishment
trasladado
cells
al área número 2 de la celda de castigo de la aledaña prisión
in the
5 y
bordering
medio.
Kilo 5.5 prison.
En esa celda de castigo
I was in
estuve
this
por
punishment
espacio
cell
de
for a
21
period
días.
of 21 days.
El resultado
As
de
a
ese
result
trato
of
fue
this
que me
treatment,
dislocaron la
they
pierna
dislocated
derecha,
my right
quedando una
leg,
pierna
which left
más
me with
larga
one
que la
leg
otra.
longer than the other.
En otra
In
golpiza
another
por
beating
protestar de
for
forma
carrying out a peaceful
pacífica, ya que las
protest because
autoridades se
authorities
negaron
denied
a
giving
darme
me
la
the
hora de
hour of
sol,
sunlight,
me pusieron las
they put the
esposas
handcuffs on me
horizontales y
in
horadas
such a
sobre mi
manner
muñeca,
that they
cortándome
dug
la
into
piel,
my
la
wrists, cutting my
circulación
skin and circulation in my
en
hands.
esa ocasión
On this occasion, they once again dragged me from the third floor to the first as a habitual form of punishment. The characteristics of the 21 days of punishment cells in area number 2 of Kilo 5.5 are: one sleeps on the floor or in a cement slab that protrudes from the wall, without illumination. The rats, cockroaches, ants are the only company a prisoner has. In the summer months, the heat is asphyxiating to the point that the cell rather seems like an oven. One cannot sleep because of discomfort and dehydration produced by these conditions. The food, if it can be called food, was brought to my cell by a guard. This consisted of a small ration of badly prepared rice, potato, or sweet potato, on numerous occasions accompanied by worms and weevils, which meant this food was in the process of putrefaction. 90% of the diet was of these small quantities of carbohydrates, and rarely an egg or some sort of entrails. It can be said that the sanitation and hygienic conditions of all the prisons where I was taken are non-existent. First, the prisoner does not have a place to sit, only on the floor. To carry out physiological needs, there is a hole in the ground inside the cell. The spigot for drinking and bathwater can be found approximately 10 to 15 centimeters from this hole, where the remains of fecal matter linger. The so-called beds are constructed of corrugated steel bars, full of rust and welded to the floor of the cell. In a Guica prison, instead of corrugated steel, it is a cement bed. All personal hygiene items must be brought by family members to the prisoner. That is when they are able to gain access to these products which ordinary Cubans lack. For a prisoner of conscience like myself, who also refused any so-called re-education plan, which is nothing more than a political indoctrination plan for the prisoner to regret defending the cause of defending human rights, family visits were every 3 months under normal conditions. This is to say, when I was not in a punishment cell or having problems with the prison authorities, I could see only 2 adults during each visit, and they could only be members of my immediate family and minors. My family members had to travel approximately 525 kilometers in order to visit me. Taking into account the difficult conditions for travel in Cuba, this was a problem for my family, although they always went to visit me despite much hardship and difficulties. At the moment, the current situation in Cuba is quite worrisome. On the one hand, there are many ordinary Cubans who are identifying with the internal resistance and their struggle for the human rights of the Cuban people. And on the other hand, the opposition is protesting on the streets, demanding freedom. What does the tyranny do? As methods of terror, they are repressing with beatings, detentions, tear gas. They are also using a strategy of detaining human rights defenders and releasing them after various hours. In Cuba, all of the rights contemplated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are violated, despite Cuba being a signatory. In regards to Article 13 of this declaration, in Cuba, one cannot enter and leave the country freely, nor can one move freely within the national territory. Cubans who are allowed to leave the country need the white card, a document emitted by the Ministry of the Interior, without which one cannot leave the country. Also, to enter the country, any Cuban citizen or person born within the country needs to solicit an entry permit or visa from Cuban authorities, which is also granted by the Ministry of the Interior and depends on his or her political behavior abroad in regards to the dictatorship. In Cuba, parents do not have the right to choose the education of their children. Education is controlled and directed by the regime, and children are indoctrinated with communist ideology to form men and women who will respond to the regime's interests. This violates Section 3 of Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Freedom of speech does not exist in Cuba. The mass media is in the hands of the tyranny. In other words, a human rights activist cannot have access to these means. If a person publicly expresses an opinion related to politics or economics contrary to that of the regime, they can be processed for enemy propaganda, a criminal offense according to the current Cuban Penal Code. There are also other offenses considered criminal in Cuba, such as pre-criminal social dangerousness, which has been used to imprison people who are opposed to the dictatorship, or people who are unemployed and are considered dangerous by the regime. There is a growing number of youth and blacks in prison under dangerousness. 90% of the Cuban prison population is black and young. This is how the tyranny controls any social explosion using coercive methods. I consider that at this moment, the revolutions in the Middle East have had an impact in Cuba, despite censorship. This is why the dictatorship on the island has increased repression. The result of these revolutions will continue to impact and encourage the Cuban people in their struggle for freedom. I speak of censorship because, for example, in Cuba, there is no free, uncensored access to the internet. Only regime elite, governmental institutions, and tourist centers have official access. Internet access is practically impossible in Cuba's provinces. It is only in Havana where it is possible with effort and restrictions. When I entered the prison in 2003, the existence of bloggers in Cuba was unthinkable, and even more so internet access. The only alternative media which is currently functioning is Twitter, which can be used to do text messaging. However, this is too expensive for Cubans because you need to use a cellular phone. In addition to this, cellular phones and phone lines are hacked by the regime, as it controls the communications network on the island. The dictatorship even uses the cellular phones of opposition activists to send death threats to fellow activists. This is done to generate division and paranoia between those who oppose the system. The international community is not doing enough with respect to the subject of Cuba. Many governments remain silent in regards to the human rights violations in Cuba. Some international news media have also been accomplices of this silence. I consider that the tyranny should be accused in all international forums as a violator of the human rights of Cubans, as this is the essence of the tyranny. A one-party system such as that which exists in Cuba must murder, repress, torture, exile, and incarcerate its people to remain in and consolidate power for 52 years. I would like Cuba not to be forgotten. I would like freedom and democracy for Cuba. I dream of a country where all Cubans can enjoy the freedom for which so many have died. I would like Cubans to be able to travel in and out of their country without having to ask for permission. I would like Cubans to have a political model which will allow them to develop their intellectual capacity and in this way help in the country's progress. In conclusion, I ask the international community for support for the internal resistance and the Cuban people in order to be able to obtain freedom. Thank you very much.